Focus. My name is Kevin Jeffrey, your moderator, and our focus today is on the BREC audit. And joining me today to talk about the audit is Brevard News political correspondent Kim Osborne, former District 1 chair of the Brevard Executive Committee. Kim, welcome. So for those of you who do not know, BREC, arm of the Brevard County Republican Party, and it has been led for the last few years by Chairman Rick Lacey. Each party is required by law to conduct an internal audit and to report it to the County Secretary of Elections. The BREC audit for the past year noted many irregularities that did not find its way into the hands of BREC members in their past meeting just this past Monday. And Kim, something's wrong in Denmark. There's a lot of things. When you look at this audit, you say, oh my.
Yeah, unfortunately, BREC is the Republican club in Brevard County that is pretty much overseen by the RPOF, which is the Republican Party of Florida. So that's who BREC reports to. Unfortunately, things are not, I don't think, being run the way they should be. So the audit that was done, there were some changes this year in the audit process. By the RPOF, it was their rules. They needed to make some changes. So they had 6 audit committee people. They each were picked by the 6 executive members of BREC. So you have Rick Lacey.
District 1, district members?
No, not the district members, just the executive board. So you have the chair, the vice chair, the secretary, the treasurer, and then the state committee woman and the state committee man. So each one of them had a person they got to pick to be on that audit committee.
Okay. So now this is not just for the Republicans. In this process, it's required by the state for every Republican organization, right?
Any organization. So the Democratic organization, their party.
Or also the Libertarians?
Libertarian, yes, all of them.
Okay, so this is required. And so last year, they didn't do this. They just went and looked at the bank accounts and reconciled it that way. I've been told.
My understanding was it was a lot less stringent. There were not, it wasn't set up where you had each executive board member had a person that was doing this audit. So this is probably the one that was really getting down to the nitty gritty, and that was probably a good thing.
Okay, so now just to the people listening, the reason that we are going through this is that we want to make sure that whether it's the Democrats, Republicans, or whoever it is, where there's bad stuff happening, we're going to let you know about it, and we're going to continue to do that. And again, our mantra here is it's not who's right, it's what's right. It doesn't matter whether the Republican, Democrats, or whoever, it's just where it's at. And so when you look at this audit, as it comes down the pike, there was 4 things they were trying to answer the questions about. And it was 1, were all contributions listed on the Supervisor of Elections report? 2, were all expenses authorized? 3, were all other Florida state statutes regarding campaign finance followed? 4, you're in Secretary of Elections report balance with the funds held by BREC. Oh my. So let's just look at some of the problems that were in the audit. And so notice, number 1, cash contributions from the sale of books of the past year's Lincoln Reagan dinner were not always reported by the chairman, who then used the cash for unreported expenditures to other Republican clubs and were not reported as contributions. Is that a problem?
Well, yeah. If you go to sell me a book and you say, okay, it's $100. I think Christy Nome was their speaker. So I give you $100 cash. I don't get a receipt, and you put $100 in your pocket and it's not reported anywhere. What are you doing with your $100? My $100. Where's it going?
Now, before we finish, I wanted to tell you that the audit committee ended up saying, with all of the findings that are in this, they ended up saying the committee did not find any indication of impropriety. Now, that raises questions. Impropriety then gets into motives, right?
Well,
as to whether or not, because there are improprieties here.
Right.
The question is, why did it happen, right? And they haven't sorted that out. And so that's a problem. The next thing that you see on the audit that jumps out? And tell me, I just highlighted some of the things that were
Mhm.
there. There were so many things. An undetermined amount of unreported cash contributions from a BREC Christmas party were received by the chairman. Again, this is improper,
It's all
right?
the same
Here.
thing, it's cash coming in.
Okay, and then the Secretary of Elections report does not reflect all cash paying persons. The chairman stated that some cash contributions were used to tip staff at the event, but no expenditures were reported to the Secretary of Elect for said tips.
That's the biggest issue there is those two things are the cash. So where is the cash going? If you got cash, you should still write a receipt out and it should be given to the treasurer and she should be reporting it because it's supposed to be reported to the supervisor of elections.
And not just from a direct point of view, but from law, state law says this, right?
Right, correct,
Okay.
correct.
The next thing is gift cards were purchased by the treasurer via debit card throughout the year 2024, and were purchased at CVS pharmacy and included American Express gift cards. There is no ledger or other record kept tracking their distribution.
My question would have been, who got the gift cards and why did they get the gift cards? What were they for?
So if you don't have any way to track this, how do we know what really happened?
We don't. We don't. And that's the whole reason for the concern in this audit process and what's going to happen. Because as a member, you should know where the money's going that you're either donating because they are collecting donations. They want money every month from their members or from, things that they're doing to try to raise money. And we as the members don't have a clue where this money is going.
And so there's no paper trail.
No,
at
for a
all.
lot of it, there's no paper trail.
In October 2024, the executive board, now this actually gets worse. I think this is really egregious here. Excuse me. In October 2024, the executive board unanimously voted to authorize an expenditure of up to $4,000 for one school board campaign. And subsequent to this authorization, the chairman spent over $17,000 on said campaign.
So I was the district board chair at that time. And in our board meeting, what I recall without having my minutes, my notes in front of me, is we were trying to authorize money for candidates so that they could get flyers out, texting, whatever it might be to help their campaigns for November. But we authorized a certain amount, and before we as the board said, okay, we'll authorize more, I believe, based on paperwork that I have and notes that I have, that stuff was spent before we actually authorized it.
And so to that point, the chairman stated that the executive board, excuse me, had authorized an expenditure of $25,000 on campaigns, and he was within his authority to do so.
It would be a matter, for me, it would be a matter of seeing at what point in time that everything was actually authorized, because looking back, I think I remember looking at some invoices that were actually done and paid for before we possibly authorized that full 25,000.
So was there an accounting of the difference in the amount of money that was spent?
It was a train wreck. I honestly cannot answer that because we went back and forth for so many days trying to figure out what was what, that I honestly can't answer you as to what they spent, what they actually were authorized and who got what.
So there's a big difference here between
Yeah.
$4,000 and $17,000 that was spent over this campaign, and there's some question as to what happened there. Petty cash was drawn multiple times throughout the year via an ATM machine and or counter withdrawal using a debit card. None of the receipts were listed on the Secretary of Elections report, and some fell outside the scope of the office supplies or other necessities. Petty cash was not drawn on a depository check as required by statute.
That's exactly right. The statute says that it is to be $100. I think it says $100 weekly. $100 weekly, and it has to be accounted for. And it's only office supplies. So we're looking at, really just things in the office. If
Sure.
you need coffee, you need cleaning supplies, you need,
So
what-
this is strictly regulated
yes,
by the statute.
Yeah.
And so according to Florida statute, chapter 106, it says spending restrictions, petty cash can only be spent on expenses of less than $100. Allowed expenses include office supplies, transportation, and other necessities. Petty cash cannot be used for communications, media, advertising, radio, or television.
but we don't
exit.
know what it was spent for.
Well, yeah, right.
Kind of
But-
hard to,
But that's
don't know.
supposed to be accounted for, right?
it should be,
Andy?
yes, it should be. Because if I'm the office manager and you're the president of whatever this is, and I say, hey, Kevin, I need $100 because I have to go buy toilet paper, paper towels, coffee, creamer, whatever. I'm going to go to Sam's, BJ's, wherever, pick it up, and I'm going to give you a receipt back and say, here's what I spent. I only spent $95, so here's your $5 change back. Isn't that how that works?
Supposed to work that way.
Okay. I mean, that makes sense to me, but
This is the biggest thing here. In 2023, the BREC funds on deposit were $51,975.01. The year-end balance in 2023 from the Secretary of Election was $57,706.61, with a difference of $5,795. These numbers do not reflect the incorrect entries for PayPal and other credits listed on the contribution report. No determinations was made when the discrepancy began in the supervisors of elections reporting. So you have a huge discrepancy there,
right.
and there's no answer as to where the money went.
You and I weren't in the audit, so I don't know what, my question would have been to the prior treasurer, which was Sharon Rose, why is there this big discrepancy? But in the audit notes, I don't believe there's even an answer. The letter that they signed off on, there's no answer as to why there's a discrepancy.
So this is what they said in signing off. They said this committee did not find any indication of impropriety. The audit committee recommends in the future that generally accepted accounting principles be followed when recording contributions and expenditures. And there's some belief in some of the people that you've talked to that the reason they did this is that they didn't have the authority to be able to actually do anything about this, and that they're thinking that something is going to be dealt with later on.
Right. So the 6 people that signed off on that audit report, my understanding from talking to at least 3 of them is that they were there to do the audit, not to be the police over it. They just had to do the audit and present what they found.
So they signed off on it only because of the fact that that's what they saw their job as.
Yep.
And
Their
it
job
wasn't
was not to
investigate.
fix it. Yeah, to investigate the discrepancies per se. They reported it. What they did once they completed it and signed off on it, that letter for the audit went to the SOE, which is Supervisor of Elections, Tim Movanik. It went to his office, and then a copy also went to the Republican Party of Florida up in Tallahassee. Now, I have since found out that both of those offices, they're probably not apt to do much about it either, unless there's a grievance filed with the Republican Party of Florida. And then I believe Tim Bobanik's office also has to have some sort of paperwork filed with his office.
Okay, so now we did talk to the Secretary of Elections, Brevard County Secretary of Elections, Tim Bobanik, and he made several declarations here. He said that he, as the Secretary of Election, is just a four-corner administrator, and that has a ministerial task to file paperwork, and that he has no statutory authority, and that he only files the paperwork, and it's to confirm that the contributions were not exceeded.
Right.
So he really doesn't have any statutory authority, but he did say that the Florida Elections Commission is the governing body that investigates violations of Florida statutes 104 and 106, and someone would have to file a complaint with them for this to take place. Now, notice one of the things concerning how serious this is, the Florida statute actually says any chair or treasurer of a state or county executive committee or any political party who knowingly misappropriates or makes an unlawful expenditure of or a false or improper accounting for the funds of such committee is guilty of a felony. of the third degree.
Mhm.
So I've known, Kim, and you probably have, Little League treasurers and whatnot that they hauled off to jail
Yes.
for less than what you see here.
Yeah.
And so are we to say that this is going to be just swept under the rug? You had an opportunity for this audit, which I have in my hands here, to be passed out to the members of BREC on this past meeting last Monday, and that didn't happen. So is this going to be swept under the rug, or what's going on?
It will be. So that was the reason for, honestly, for this, because I feel like it's not okay for the members of BREC not to know what's happening with the money that is in their club. It's just like if you're your church group, if you're doing your tithing, you're doing your things, you're giving money, you're helping, but they're like, oh no, you don't need to know what we have in our accounting bucket here. We're spending it the way we want to. It just trust us. So it seems to be that the only way that this is going to get out to the membership is going to be through this. I was the one that honestly wanted to take the letter and make 100 copies and start handing it out at the meeting Monday night. But I wasn't quite ready to do that. So I figured we would talk about it here and then we would move forward where we needed to go. But since we have found out that there, like we said, the grievance has to be done with the RPOF. We have to send a complaint to the election committee that basically they're going to have to look at this now. If they choose at that point to do nothing, I don't know what other options we have.
So there's just some problems with, for the lack of a better phrase, the chain of command.
Yeah.
Right. So that you have the chairman who is basically has his hand in the cooking jar, and he's completely controlling a lot of the finances. I did in the past.
Yes.
Controlled a lot of the finances and also the access to those finances, and that was a key that he had that was taken or was given to the new treasurer.
Correct.
Which he demanded to receive back.
Right.
And the reason for that was?
He just felt like he needed to have it, and that it probably wasn't necessary for the new treasurer to have it, just like Rick didn't feel like it was necessary for the new treasurer to have the list of all the BREC members. As an executive board member, if you ask for a list of all your members with their name, their address, and a phone number, there's no reason why you shouldn't have that. But Rick says, no, that's my information, and I don't know that they want to have it shared. When you sign up to be part of a club like that, and you put your name down there, your address, and your phone number, okay, most of the time your name and your address, anybody can find off the Brevard County property appraiser unless you have it blocked.
Right.
So it's not private information, and Rick Lacey isn't the private person that gets to hold all the information and nobody else gets it.
But up to this point, and there's been a lot of controversy about this, he's pretty much controlled BREC. And it's been a one-man operation, basically. This is not a republic. This is pretty much a dictatorship. So.
It was, and being on the board as a District 1 chair, it was, to say the least, in the beginning when I first started, I think it was in February of 22. I was new to politics in the sense I've always voted, but I hadn't been involved enough to know the ins and the outs. And we have a Brevard Republican Executive Committee. We have all these different things. I wasn't into it that much. My husband and I decided to get involved. And when we did, Rick Lacey, who was the chair at the time, and Cindy Roberts, who was the vice chair, they were really excited when we went to our orientation meeting because they found people then that they could try to get into the District 1 chair seat because the lady that had been there before had just decided not to do it. So they were in the middle of this and had nobody as a chairperson.
But you didn't know the history.
I didn't know all the history. And it got to the point where we started learning things, but what I was learning was based on what I was getting from the chair and the vice chair. And unfortunately, when my views changed some on who I supported for the county commission seats and some of the other things, it didn't fall in line with what they wanted. So at that point in time, then best word I could say is I was blacklisted. So I think at that point in time, I started digging a little deeper in everything that was going on. And it was really eye-opening and also sad. It really was.
So is there correlation between where BREC is and these kinds of things and what's happening with the Republicans in Brevard County and some of the issues they have?
Well, yeah, because if you've got a chairman who always wants things to be his way, then you're running into problems because it's not a group thing. We're not trying, we're not able to give our own opinion about something. And I think that's why we're finding a split so much with BREC.
It's kind of some of the things that were happening in the National Democratic Party, right? With
Exactly.
The anointing of candidates and
Yes.
they're not being discoursed and this kind of thing.
Exactly.
What do you think is going to happen?
The audit?
Yes.
My hope is that because I feel like I went through the proper channels in the sense that I contacted a few people that I felt like I needed to get some questions answered. And everybody that I spoke with had the same attitude that the membership needs to know. They have a right to know about this. So it's something that we need to make sure that the BREC membership knows, and that the grievance is filed with the RPOF, and that we file the other complaint. And then at that point in time, if the RPOF says I'm not doing anything, we're going to let it go. If the complaint that's filed doesn't go anywhere, I don't know. I don't, at that point in time, I don't know what the next step would be. I have to say that Randy Stackhouse, who is the new treasurer, he was elected in December. He's doing a phenomenal job up against people who don't want him to. So
He's actually bringing integrity and.
He is integrity. He said, we will not accept cash. Anything that we're doing, we will not accept cash without a receipt. So when you have a cash payment, you're going to get a receipt saying that you paid. Those are things that are important because that was what they said in the audit. We need to do better. But there's still things that he's not going to be able to overcome, because if he doesn't have the key for the mailbox where the checks come into or the invoices come into, and only Rick Lacey has a key, why is that? The prior treasurer had the key, so why shouldn't Randy Stackhouse have the key?
There's a lot of questions that have been raised by this audit. The organization and the way that the structure is being run with the chairman, he's actually running it with a heavy hand. It seems like that he's got his hands into everything. We don't know where this is going to go, but we do understand this, that the Republican Party is the largest party in Brevard County, and it does affect what happens with BREC, affects who gets elected right down on a local level. And a lot of the people that are in office today, particularly in Titusville, some of the people that we're having trouble with were a result of this organization and their influence in the election. So it's important to you. We're Republicans, we're conservative. I think that you look at my record, I'm very conservative, but I'm for what's right more than anything. And so is Kim. And so I don't care if it's the Democratic Party or the Libertarian Party or whoever it is. If it's not right and it doesn't pass the muster, we want to make that known. Thank you for joining us on this issue of Brevard News Focus. Kim, thanks for joining us. And we wanted to get this information out and for you to know what's going on behind the scenes at the Brevard Republican Executive Committee. See you next time.